You handed yourself over. That's the thing nobody will say to you, so I will. Not once, not in a single dramatic moment where you can point to the date and build a story around your surrender. You did it the way most destruction happens, gradually, then completely. One small yes to something you didn't believe. One swallowed no that tasted like acid going down. One opinion you kept to yourself because the room felt hostile and you decided it wasn't worth it. Then another, until the habit of self-concealment became so natural you stopped noticing the weight of it. And now you call it exhaustion. You say you're tired. You say the world is too much. You say you've been beaten down by circumstances, by people, by systems too large to fight. Maybe you even say you're depressed, which is at least an honest word for what happens when a human being stops becoming and starts merely enduring. But underneath that diagnosis, underneath the fatigue and the numbness and the low-grade despair that hums through your days like background radiation, there is something you have not yet been willing to look at directly. You are not the victim of the herd. You are its volunteer. This is Nietzsche's most savage observation, and it's the one that still lands like a blade after more than a century. Not because it's cruel, because it's precise. He did not write for your comfort. He wrote to hand you a mirror with no flattering light, no soft angle, no mercy in the glass. And what the mirror shows is this: the pressure you feel from the world around you, the conformity you resent, the mediocrity you claim to be suffocating under. You chose it. Not once, not under duress so extreme it dissolved you. You chose it repeatedly, consciously, for reasons that felt reasonable at the time, because choosing it was easier than the alternative. What is the alternative? That's the question, isn't it? That's why you're still watching. Think about the last time you had a genuinely original thought, an idea, a value, a way of seeing the world that came from inside you, that wasn't borrowed from a group you belonged to, a platform you scroll through, an authority you've outsourced your thinking to. Now think about what you did with it. Did you sharpen it? Did you live it? Did you let it become the axis around which your choices rotated? Or did you look around the room, metaphorically, digitally, socially, and quietly measure whether that thought was permitted? Whether the people you wanted to like you would still like you if they knew what you actually thought? You measured, you found it wanting, you shelved it. That is the moment Nietzsche is talking about. Not war, not tragedy, not the massive catastrophic failures that people write memoirs about. The shelving. The small, daily, almost imperceptible act of ranking other people's approval above your own becoming. He called this the morality of the herd, not an insult, a diagnosis, a description of the dominant operating system of human civilization, the one that rewards compliance, punishes deviation, and gradually, patiently, grinds down anything that rises above the average into something that fits. And here is the unbearable part. The herd doesn't need to force you. That's the efficiency of it. You watch what happens to people who stand out, who say the wrong thing, who refuse to flatten themselves into acceptable shapes. And without anyone telling you to, you adjust. You pre-conform. You edit yourself before anyone asks you to. The herd doesn't break you. It doesn't need to. It just waits while you break yourself, and calls the result maturity. How long have you been calling it that? If these words carved an echo within your void, do not turn back. The descent has just begun. Click below, subscribe, and claim your reality. Nietzsche did not believe the problem was society. He had no fantasy of a better collective, no dream of a reformed system that would finally allow human beings to flourish. That is not his diagnosis, and if you're waiting for it, you have already misunderstood him. The problem, as he saw it, was metaphysical before it was political. It was a problem of values, specifically of whose values you are living by, and whether you have ever in your life actually chosen them. He called this the problem of value creation, and the reason it destroys people is that almost no one does it. Here is what happens instead. You are born into a world that is already saturated with values. Good and evil are already defined. What is worth wanting is already advertised. What kind of person deserves respect is already modeled for you in 10,000 images before you are old enough to ask whether you agree. And because you are a social animal, because belonging is not a luxury but a survival drive that evolution carved into your nervous system, you absorb these values without examination. You wear them like a borrowed coat that was made for someone else's body. It fits well enough. You stop noticing the places where it cuts. Nietzsche named the psychological mechanism underneath this ressentiment, not resentment. The French matters because he meant something more corrosive than ordinary bitterness. Ressentiment is what happens when a human being cannot express their drives outward, cannot affirm their own power and will, and so turns inward and backward. It is the psychology of someone who has accepted defeat but cannot admit it, so they reframe defeat as virtue. They cannot climb, so they decide height is immoral. They cannot create, so they sanctify the average. They cannot become more, so they build an entire ethics around the goodness of staying the same. This is not an abstraction. This is your co-worker who subtly undermines every ambitious idea in every meeting because ambition has been, somewhere in their history, too dangerous to hold. This is the family member who calls your unconventional life choices selfish, because your freedom is a mirror they cannot look at without pain. This is you, and this may be the hardest thing I will say. Every time you call your own desire for more unrealistic, every time you dress your capitulation in the language of wisdom, ressentiment doesn't announce itself. It comes wearing the face of humility. Now understand what Nietzsche meant by the will to power, because it has been catastrophically mistranslated by people who needed it to mean something dangerous. He did not mean domination. He did not mean conquest. He meant the fundamental drive of living things to express, to grow, to overcome. Not other people, but themselves. The will to power is what a tree does when it pushes through concrete. It's what you feel in the rare moments when you are doing something difficult that you actually chose, something that requires everything you have and returns to you a version of yourself you respect. It is the experience of becoming as opposed to the slow, static suffocation of merely being. Most human institutions, Nietzsche argued, exist to suppress this, not through malice, through the herd's own logic. The herd needs predictability. It needs its members interchangeable. It needs the extraordinary to be discouraged before it can set a precedent. And it accomplishes this not through tyranny, but through something far more effective, moral language. It attaches virtue to compliance and vice to deviation. It tells you that self-sacrifice is noble, that ambition is greed, that standing out is arrogance, that your will to become is something you should be ashamed of. And the genius of it, the absolutely diabolical genius, is that it makes you police yourself. You don't need a guard if the prisoner has internalized the walls. That is where Nietzsche's analysis cuts deepest. Not in its critique of external institutions, in its exposure of how thoroughly those institutions have colonized the interior of the people who resent them. You hate your job, but you believe, somewhere underneath the hate, that you don't deserve better. You want to create something, but you've accepted, somewhere underneath the wanting, that creation is for a certain kind of person, and you are not that kind. You feel the pull toward something larger than your current life, but you have built, brick by brick, and over years, a philosophical justification for staying exactly where you are. That justification has many names: responsibility, pragmatism, realism, maturity. Nietzsche had one name for all of them: slave morality. Not a slur, a technical description of a value system built from weakness, rationalized into righteousness, one that has convinced the people it diminishes that their diminishment is, in fact, their dignity. You are living inside a value system you did not choose. The question is whether you will keep calling that wisdom. Here is the assumption you walked in with, the one this video is going to destroy. You believe that if the conditions were different, if the job were different, if the relationship were different, if the culture were more supportive, if the family had been less demanding, if the economy were less brutal, you would be living differently. You believe that your smallness is situational, that your failure to become is something the world did to you, that the you who capitulated is not the real you, and the real you is waiting patiently for circumstances favorable enough to finally emerge. This is the most comfortable lie available to a human being, and Nietzsche identified it as the core mechanism by which mediocrity sustains itself across generations. The lie is elegant because it contains something true. Circumstances do matter. Structures are real. Some people are born into arrangements so brutal that survival itself is the act of will. He was not naive about power, but, and this is where he goes somewhere the lie cannot follow, he observed that human beings have an extraordinary capacity to deploy the language of victimhood, not when they are actually crushed, but specifically when they are not. When there is room, when there is possibility, when there is, if they are honest, enough freedom to try, and the prospect of failure that comes with it. It is the possibility of failure that produces the story of constraint. Think about this carefully, because it is the mechanism of your life if you have never examined it. Genuine impossibility produces grief. It produces mourning and adaptation. What it does not produce, consistently across a lifetime, is the specific low-grade bitterness, the resentment of people who have done what you haven't, the elaborate philosophical position that the deck is too stacked to bother. That specific constellation of feelings is not the result of true impossibility. It is the result of the will turning against itself, because the risk of genuine attempt is higher than the comfort of guaranteed non-failure. You didn't give up because you couldn't. You gave up because you could, and that was unbearable. Nietzsche's concept of the eternal recurrence arrives here, and most people misread it as cosmology, as a claim about time. But that is not where its force lives. Its force lives as an ethical demand. Imagine that you must live your life exactly as you are living it, every choice repeated infinitely, the whole arc recurring without alteration forever. Now sit with what that does to your chest. The tightening you feel, that physical constriction in response to that thought, is not a response to the abstract idea. It is your body's honest assessment of your choices. The recurrence is a mirror, not a metaphysics. And most people, when they hold it up, cannot look, because the choices they would need to make differently are not the big ones, not the dramatic reversals. The choices are the small ones. The voice they swallowed at breakfast, the creative act they postponed for a decade, the relationship they stayed in 3 years past the moment they knew, the self they began editing in adolescence and never stopped. These are not tragic failures. They are ordinary, repeated choices that, accumulated across years, produce a life that feels like it was lived by someone else. That is the existential weight of the eternal recurrence, not whether the universe actually cycles, whether you can face your life as a choice. And here is the darkest implication. The place where most content about Nietzsche pulls back because the audience might leave. The people you have been comparing yourself to. The ones whose freedom you resent. The ones whose ambition looks like arrogance to you. Whose creativity looks like showing off. Whose refusal to flatten themselves into acceptable shapes looks like selfishness. They did not receive different circumstances. They made different decisions about what to do with the circumstances they had. And you know this. Some part of you has always known this. The ressentiment you feel toward them is not the product of their wrongdoing. It is the product of your self-knowledge. You resent, most precisely, the people who are doing what you know you could do. That is not an insult. It is a map. It is the most honest information your emotional life has ever handed you, and you have been filing it under envy and calling it settled. There is a way through this, but it requires something Nietzsche called the most difficult of all human tasks, the transvaluation of values. Not a self-help reframe, not an affirmation. A genuine, uncomfortable, potentially costly decision to examine every value you currently hold and ask with absolute seriousness, is this mine? Did I choose this? Or did the herd hand it to me? And have I been defending it ever since because the alternative, standing alone in my own valuation, is terrifying? That terror is the door. Four weapons, each one Nietzsche's, each one requiring something from you that is genuinely uncomfortable, which is how you'll know they're real. Weapon 1, the genealogy. Nietzsche's method, the one he used to crack open Christian morality, applies with equal force to the values running your personal life. He called it genealogical inquiry, not philosophy as a search for timeless truths. Philosophy is archaeology, digging down through the layers of your beliefs to find where they actually came from, who built them, and whose interests they serve. Here is how you apply it. Take the value you are most certain of, the one that feels most obviously true, the one you would defend first if challenged. Now ask, where did this come from? Not who told it to you, though that matters, but what conditions produced the person who needed this to be true? What fear does this belief protect you from? What would you have to risk if this value turned out to be wrong? A man who believes that ambition is dangerous probably learned that from a family where ambition got punished. A woman who believes that wanting more is selfish probably inherited that from a tradition that needed her to want less. These are not timeless moral truths. They are survival strategies that calcified into worldviews. The genealogy breaks the calcification. It doesn't tell you what to believe instead. That's your task. But it removes the false authority of inherited values, the feeling that your current constraints are written into the nature of things, rather than into the history of your specific wounds. The discomfort. You will find that several of your most important beliefs were not chosen. They were installed. And uninstalling them means temporarily having nothing to replace them. That gap is not emptiness. It is the beginning of honest evaluation. Weapon 2, the affirmation. Nietzsche's opposite of ressentiment is not positivity. Do not make that mistake. His opposite of ressentiment is affirmation, the capacity to say yes to your own life, including its suffering, without needing to explain the suffering away or find someone to blame for it. He embodied this concept in the figure of Dionysus and in the image of the child in his 3 metamorphoses of the spirit. The spirit becomes a camel first, a beast of burden, loading itself with obligations and duties, doing what is demanded. Then it becomes a lion, rebellious, negating, fighting against what it no longer believes. But the lion can only say no. The final transformation is into the child, and the child can say yes again. Not the yes of ignorance, not the pre-critical yes that doesn't know what it's accepting. The yes of someone who has seen the full weight of existence and chooses to play with it anyway. The weapon here is this. Stop building your identity around what you oppose. The person who defines themselves entirely by their refusal, by their rejection of the herd, their contempt for conformity, their opposition to the system, is still living in reaction, still letting external forces set the agenda. The affirmation Nietzsche demands is the harder thing. What are you for? Not against. For. What values have you actually examined and actually chosen? What would you build if opposition were no longer your organizing principle? the discomfort. Most people who believe they are rebelling are simply performing the herd's shadow. Genuine affirmation requires you to create rather than merely reject. Weapon 3, the amor fati, love of fate, not acceptance, not tolerance, not the grim resignation of someone who has learned to make peace with their circumstances. Love, the active, muscular choice to want exactly what has happened, because it is what made you, and what you are is the only material you have to work with. Nietzsche's amor fati is not an invitation to passivity. It is the exact opposite. It is the removal of every excuse to wait. If you love your fate, including the parts that damaged you, the years you wasted, the choices you regret, then there is nothing left to recover from before you can begin. The damage is not an obstacle to your becoming. It is the texture of it. The very specific shape of your suffering is the very specific material of your possible strength. The discomfort. This demands that you stop treating your history as an explanation for your present. The story of what happened to you has been useful. It has made sense of your choices. Amor fati requires you to love that story enough to stop hiding behind it. Weapon 4, the rank. Nietzsche believed in the pathos of distance, the recognition that human beings are not equal in their development, their courage, or their capacity for self-overcoming. This is his most uncomfortable idea, and the one most often misrepresented. So hear it precisely. He was not advocating hierarchy imposed from outside. He was describing the interior experience of someone who measures themselves against their own highest possibility, rather than against the average of those around them. Here is the weapon. Rank yourself against the version of you that has done the work. Not against your peers, not against public figures, not against an abstract ideal, against the specific, conceivable, achievable version of you that took the risk you have been postponing, that made the creative attempt you have been delaying, that spoke the truth you have been softening. That version of you is real enough to feel. Let it be your standard. The discomfort, this is ruthless. There is no social cushion here, no grade on a curve, no participation credit. The only question is whether you are closer to that version of yourself than you were last year, last month, yesterday. If the answer is no, you know exactly what to do next. Come back to where we started. You handed yourself over. That was the wound. Not a wound inflicted from outside. A wound that required your participation, your compliance, your long series of small decisions to make yourself acceptable rather than actual. The herd didn't hunt you. You walked in, sat down, and learned the rules. And then, somewhere along the way, you forgot that you had learned them. You began to experience them as gravity, as simply the way things are. That forgetting is what Nietzsche spent his life trying to reverse. You have now traveled through his diagnosis, through the understanding that your values were given to you by a system with its own interests, a system that rewards interchangeability and punishes the will to become. You have sat with the concept of ressentiment long enough to recognize it not as a character flaw, but as an adaptive response that has outlived its usefulness. You have held the eternal recurrence and felt in your body what it means to face your choices as choices rather than circumstances. You have watched the deepest assumption you arrived with, that your smallness is the world's fault, get examined and found insufficient, and you have 4 weapons now. The genealogy, which dismantles the false authority of inherited values. The affirmation, which replaces opposition with creation. The amor fati, which makes your entire history into material rather than excuse. The rank, which measures you against the version of yourself that doesn't flinch. This is not a program. Programs are what the herd sells. This is a confrontation. Nietzsche doesn't give you a method you can follow without changing. He gives you a mirror you can only look into by becoming someone capable of looking. And that is the work, not the reading, not the understanding, not even the intellectual agreement. The work is the moment you take the genealogy seriously enough to discover that a value you have been defending is one you never chose. The moment you feel the amor fati as something more than a phrase and less than a comfort. The moment the rank stops being an abstraction and becomes a specific demand on a specific Tuesday morning when the choice is in front of you. Most people who encounter Nietzsche do exactly what the herd does with any genuinely dangerous idea. They aestheticize it. They make it an identity. They put the quotes on their walls and read the summaries and feel the frisson of proximity to something transgressive. And then they go back to their lives unchanged. They have consumed the philosopher without undergoing the philosopher. And Nietzsche, had he lived to see this, would have found it perfectly predictable. He said as much. He said his books were dynamite. He said some are born posthumously. He knew that most of his readers would use his work to feel superior, rather than to actually become superior. Superior in his terms, meaning superior to who they were yesterday. You are not changed by knowing this. You are changed by doing something with it. The something is not grand. It is not a resignation letter or a manifesto or a public declaration of your reinvention. It is smaller and harder than any of those things. It is the next moment you feel the herd's pull. The next time a room's unspoken consensus asks you to be smaller, quieter, more acceptable, more aligned with the average. And you notice it. Not just feel it. Notice it. Name what is happening. And then, with full knowledge of the cost and no guarantee of the outcome, choose differently. Not once. Every time. That is what Nietzsche meant by self-overcoming. Not a destination, a direction. Not an achievement, a practice that has no completion and no applause and no guarantee that anyone will recognize what it cost you. The herd offers belonging as a reward for your surrender. Nietzsche offers something else. Become who you are. Now tell me, what value have you been defending that you never actually chose?